Ask the Podcast Coach for September 25th, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from the Average Guy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Good to be back in the Average Guy.tv studios, but big thanks, Dave Garofalo, Ed Sullivan, and the crew of Two Guys Cigar Shop for hosting us last week. Tons of fun, just to do it differently, right? You know, just to be, their studio is beautiful, and I mean, it was just tons of fun. And how are we on your side, Dave? Was it sound was okay? Everything was good?
Oh yeah, it was fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It's just, well, you know now how I felt when Glenn was here, because it's really easy to just have a conversation with Glenn because he's standing right here, and then you're like, oh wait, Jim's over there. We should probably, and you did a really good job of keeping me in the conversation. So it was, because that's hard to do. It's
two
weird.
Daves. Like that was the other thing. Is two. So I had to say Dave Jackson or Dave Garofalo. You know, kind of depending on who the Daves were. But we had a really good time. Hung out with Ed Sullivan there and had a really good time. Wore me out on cigars. Let's just be really clear. It was one of a good thing can be taken too far.
And the one way to get the taste it out of your mouth would probably be to maybe wash down the cigar smoke with a little
some coffee. Yeah, it's time for a coffee pour. Let's get that done. Yeah.
All right, excellent. And of course, that pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. I had somebody reach out this week. They're like, hey, what's that Mark guy's name? And I'm like, oh, just go to podcastbranding.co. So if you need some sort of logo, some sort of artwork, maybe you need a lead magnet, maybe you need a whole website, Mark can do it. If you want to look professional, and I know I've said this so many times, but I was doing something the other day and I had to upload the School of Podcasting logo, and I smile every time I do it. I was like, man, that looks so much better than what I used to have. So, and the great thing is Mark is a podcaster, so you don't have to explain to him, oh, it's kind of like this radio thing. He totally gets it, and he's going to help you look super. So whether you need artwork, logo, website, or even a branding audit, go over to podcastbranding.co and tell Mark that Jim and Dave sent us. Sent you. It's live, people. Dave messes up.
Happens. Big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there at based on a true story podcast.com. Hey, if you're an FBI guy, he just did an episode on J. Edgar Hoover. And had an assistant that was his assistant. So, you know, he was the very first FBI director, and J. Edgar Hoover was. And then he has his assistant on. So, you know, Clint Eastwood in 2011 did this movie called J. Edgar. And so they look at that movie, what was true, what wasn't. And then if you like games, I've never mentioned this, but if you like games, Dan starts with 2 truths and a lie. So he puts out 3 things that this would be a good thing for some podcasters to think about from an engagement. Yeah. Because now you got to listen through the whole thing.
That's a great strategy.
It is a good strategy. So Dan, thanks for sponsoring the mug. And we got actually that looks good. For some reason, I think because I have the lights on now.
Yeah.
I'm using my iPhone as a camera, and it looks a little bit better. So Dan, thanks for the sponsorship.
So, and you said you got a new camera?
Well, it's coming.
It's coming.
So I've been a little, you know, the C920, Dave, has been the workhorse for podcasters for 100 years. And it just once I used Ecamm or what's the E something to be able to run off the Mac, the phone,
Ecamm Live
Pro,
or something. Yeah,
something like that. There's an app you can use. It's plugged into the Mac. So I'm using my iPhone 12 as a camera, and I really like it. It's got good definition. It's got good color. I have good control. I found it really hard to go back to the C922, right? Or C920 in my case. And it just looks different. It's harder to control. It's a little more grainy. It's kind of, and I was like, I've been on the journey of trying to find a new camera. I almost got the one you got. What did you pick up?
This is the Elgato Face Cam. So
Yeah, so I almost picked that up. What was the retail on that? It's like $200.
it's $200. Yeah.
$200. Okay. So I've been looking around, and Logitech has the Brio, which I thought, okay, maybe that, but they have a brand new, I think it's fairly brand new 4K camera as well.
Hmm.
That for some reason it came up on my Facebook feed. Probably because I've been looking for, probably because
Yeah.
I've been talking about and looking
Did you
for
say the
cameras.
word camera out loud or something?
Webcam,
Yeah.
right? So now I'm getting all in my Facebook feed now that I bought it. Anyways, I bought this Logitech 4K camera. Not necessarily I'm not going to use it for 4K because I just don't have that need. But I'm interested in will it do as well as the iPhone does from a camera standpoint? If it doesn't, I'm sending it back. By the way, I don't like I'm buying it to test it to see if it's any good. I bought it directly from Logitech, which is kind of interesting. Normally I'd buy those kinds of things on Amazon, but I bought it from them this time. So it'll be in, I think later this week. So we'll have it for the show. We'll possibly have it for the show next week. Just something different.
Yeah. Is this the one that I'm looking on Amazon, and it looks like they have one just called Logitech 4K, 4K. Pro webcam?
Yeah. That's the one. And it's $200, same price as what you paid for the.
Not on Amazon, it's not. It's $174.95.
That's the refurb.
Ah, there we go. Yeah. Renewed. I see that.
The renewed. The normal one's $199.
Yeah, $199.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that'd be cool to. Yeah, because you were saying you used your phone as your camera.
Yeah, and it on paper that sounds like a good idea. Like 2 uses, plug it in, you get it. You can also use it as a webcam. Never fails. I need the phone for 2-factor authentication, or I need the phone to, like this morning. I use Slack. You and I talk via Slack kind of for the show. And I don't have Slack installed on any computer here. I usually just use it off my phone. But then when I tried to log into Slack on the Mac, it was like, hey, what's your 2-factor? Oh, crap. Now I got to pull the phone off the thing, turn it around, log into my 2-factor. So while it sounds like a great idea to be using your phone as a webcam, and listen, I really like this look, I can't. It's too inconvenient. There's too many times I need the phone. So I just thought I got to get a different webcam. I did buy that Sony EV10. I'm not getting that right. I bought my daughter a really nice camera.
VZ10 probably,
because
I have the VZ1.
Yeah, VZ. So I bought that $800. I bought that for my daughter so she could do some stuff for school. And
yeah,
that's another thought too. Is do you take a camera? I mean, that's an $800 webcam if you do it that way. Right now, that kind of thing I could set up. Every time I need to use it, I can plug it in and put it on a stand or put it on something, make it work that way. That's a nice camera to get that done. Ed helped me buy that when I was out there in Boston with Ed. He helped me pick that thing up tax free in New Hampshire, which is pretty nice.
Nice.
Sure, I'm supposed to report that on my Nebraska taxes,
and of course you will. Yes,
of course I will.
Yeah,
it's on the record here. It'll be there.
The nice thing about that, I have the VZ1, and which is probably now down to $600. Is the VZ10 allows you to switch lenses. Yeah. And the VZ1 is just one, and it's so
yeah, and it comes with the stubby lens. I bought the one. You can buy just the body, but I bought the one with that lens. And so she's been digging into it this week and spending a bunch of time with it and taking some pictures and stuff. Eventually I have to test it. I have to bring it down and put it on. We'll have to do a show with that on there. I didn't think of that this week. That'd have been a good idea to do this week. But
yeah, Craig is asking me, what am I doing when I reshoot the SOP videos? I'm doing 2 things. If it's just me talking into a camera, I actually use my Sony VZ1. So that's not the camera I'm using now. I'm using the Elgato face cam. But I use the VZ1. It gives me that fun, blurry background kind of thing. And it's just just an extra layer of gloss, just barely. I mean, this would be fine. It really would. And then when I'm doing the something where I'm sharing my screen, I'm now doing OBS, and I have a couple scenes set up because I asked my students, and for some reason they want to see my face. I don't, for whatever reason. So there are times now when I'm sharing my screen that I have a preset. They call them scenes in OBS. I can hit a button and send me down to the bottom right-hand corner. And for those, I'll use the face cam, or I might use the VZ1. I forget which one, but it's primarily I'm using the Sony VZ1 just because, again, it's just got a little more gloss on it. And it's kind of cool. If I wanted to, I could click a button and have it erase my wrinkles and all sorts of other things that I don't do. But it's pretty cool. Jeremy,
smooth out your face.
that's it. Jeremy says I recently got a Nikon Z50 and I've been using it with a low-cost USB HDMI adapter as a camera. Yeah, I have the Elgato something 4K thing, blah blah blah. That you plug HDMI in. It's supposed to, but for the record, you don't want to see me in 4K. I'm like, it's just the more blurry you can make me, the better.
You just don't want to see a bunch of old guys, you know.
Well, I remember when I was at NAB, so this was probably 3 years ago, and I think they had 8K. Like it was because this is, you know, and I just remember thinking, and it was like a news channel. So these were beautiful people. And I was like, but you could see like every detail. And I was like, nobody is ever going to want to step in front of an 8K camera. I'm like, that's just, you know, Craig says, I'm using Camtasia for that. I will on occasion I will record in OBS, throw that into Camtasia, and then, you know, maybe zoom in on things that I need to. That's another thing. It kind of depends on what the video is, and what I'm doing, but it's a lot of fun. It's funny when I go back and look at some of these old videos where the content was it's evergreen.
Yeah.
But you log in and it's just like, wow, that looks holy cow. So
well, and it's you know, we're getting to that. We're not getting there. We're there. But there's some really good choices now for cameras. And yeah, you know, you're going to spend cameras are probably to the point right now where you get what you pay for. You know, $99 webcam, pretty great. If you're buying the cheap $30 ones, probably awful. And then they probably get better, not probably, they do get better as you spend more money. So that, you know, if you're in the $300 range, it's going to be pretty great. If you're in this $800 range, those are going to be dynamite. The real question is, as you're switching, so what'd you switch to there?
That's the C920. So now, granted, this is one of the things that used to drive me nuts. And for anybody watching this, I just turned. Right now, I'm kind of white, even more whiter than usual. Right. I was kind of orange a minute ago. But the C920, I constantly, anytime I rebooted, I had to go in and set all my color settings. Where on the Elgato, the settings are saved in the camera. Right. Which I love, but it's one of those where you're like, it doesn't look bad. And I could make me look a whole lot better than I look right now because I'd have to go into the settings and things like that.
It's tuned for your other camera. Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I could flip it too. So this is riveting for our audio.
Oh, I know, for the audio friends.
You'll need to come over. And again, I'm using eyeglasses on the Mac to do this, but and I still have the 22 here. Because I have my studio lights on for the other camera, it really washes me out on the C920. So again, to your point, I could tune this and get it pretty close, but I think now is the time. God, that is awful. I can barely stand to look at myself.
Yeah. Well, and I remember on Saturday morning, I would reboot my computer because I'm doing a live stream. I want to, you know, make sure everything's fresh and new. And then I'd fire up my camera. I'm like, oh crap, hold on. I got to fix the white balance and that whole 9 yards. So Uncle Marv says, what's up, Casper? And I'm like, Casper looks at me and goes, man, you're white. I mean, it's
for both of us, it's a white. Well, and I've got some studio lights that are on here and for the iPhone, the studio lights, I need them. For the C920, I don't. And so it's just, I look better without them. So it's, I think it's dialing it in, make it work for you. I guess my point is, Dave, I want a dedicated camera. I don't want to be setting up a camera. Like I don't want to take a really nice Sony camera and make it and just have it sit there. Or be reinstalling it every time I need to use my webcam for work. Oftentimes I take calls right away. I don't want to have to be setting up a webcam for that. So it made sense. We'll give this one a test and see if it's any better. They're touting, big things about it. So we'll give it a try. I almost got what you got, but I thought, no, this is new. Let me try this one. Maybe our listeners will appreciate us trying different things out. So this week.
And it sounds weird. The reason I really like this camera is there's no microphone on it.
Yes.
So I never have to worry about, crap, it picked up the wrong mic kind of thing. So that was
that's true. Actually, that's really it's extra hardware you don't need.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's really kind of designed for Logitech is in this space now where they're trying to be the ultimate, home work from home camera.
Yeah.
Right. Listen, no matter what you do, that microphone is always going to sound terrible. Always. Like it just doesn't. So, yeah, unfortunately, excuse me, they're still playing in that space and promoting it. So I never use it. It's one of those drawbacks, though, that every once in a while something will get switched over to it. And you don't know
Yeah.
it. You've been recording it, and the people you've been
It's the
recording
old
with
tap the
don't
microphone trick. Yeah.
don't tell you. Like,
Yeah.
couldn't you hear my audio is terrible? I didn't know.
Yeah. Dave wants to know, would Ecamm Live work with a Note 5? And I'm so out of hardware, I don't know what a Note 5 is.
That is a Android device.
Ah.
That's a pretty fairly nice Android
That's a
device.
good question.
Ecamm.
And then I saw another thing in here from Sergeant Fred. He was asking about Daniel J. Lewis's. I found Daniel J. Lewis's email programs for podcasting quite useful for new and inspiring podcasters. What do you think? Daniel J. Lewis does not make crap. I mean, that's if he ever needs a testimonial for his website, that would be it. Daniel J. Lewis does not make crap. Dash Dave Jackson School of Podcasting. I mean, I love his plugin. I love his share and subscribe. I use my podcast reviews. And, now granted, Daniel's a good friend of mine, but I would also say, if it wasn't, the only thing that makes me scratch my head, and it's just because I want more Daniel, is if you got time to write a newsletter, why don't you have time to step behind the microphone? I'd love to have a little more.
Are you calling him out?
I'm calling him out. I'm very politely going, all right, look.
You're friends, you can do that.
Yeah. So we'll see. But no, I forget how I ended up. I was on his list somehow, and I see where I've been getting that. Craig says, I was keying green screen this morning. My tea showed up green. Being a Brit, I don't think people would notice.
Borderline, Craig. Borderline.
Yeah. I might have to dig out a green screen because we'll have to see. I spent the week in Pittsburgh in the technically it was Libsyn, but it wasn't Libsyn. It was our sister company that we purchased, which is Pair Networks, which is a WordPress hosting and all sorts of hosting over there. And they have a bigger building, and they had a board of directors meeting because it's a publicly traded company. So lots of big shot smarty pants people. And boy, I started that discussion, and I went to Pittsburgh. Oh, and I might be doing more things for their marketing department.
Oh, nice.
I might be a little tech support, but on occasion. So I suggested to them a couple things, and I was like, I would have to lose my backdrop. I don't know if they want a giant School of Podcasting logo in any videos. And I'm not switching I was like, I'll just get my green screen out because I got one of those it's on the floor and you pull it up.
And it tightens.
Yeah.
That's probably the way to do it.
So I bought that on Black Friday, literally probably 2 years ago. It's in my closet in the box, never even taken it
really
out. Yeah.
And
it turns out it's an Elgato, and I was like, well, there you go. It fits the studio. But
we had Ross Brand on Home Gadget Geeks this week, and Ross has gone green screen, and whatever he's doing it really, really, really well. I mean, his background looks pro, and sometimes with green screen we tend to get we put the Eiffel Tower behind us, or we're in a meadow with a stream, and you're like, I'm not sure that's really what that's meant for. But Ross had a really, really nice static background. It wasn't things moving around back there. And it was implemented very, very well. He did a nice job.
Well, and I think half of it is, if you want it to look realistic, it's getting that right perspective. So sometimes people will have this thing and like, wow, that book is taller than your head, because it's a bookcase. So you have to still kind of have this depth perception. And, because for me, I would probably just have a blank color behind me, make it look like there were some lights or something like that. But we'll see. It'll be fun to watch. But every time I'm around the president of Libsyn, she says, we need to use you more than we're using you in other areas. So that was because the whole time I'm like, why am I coming to a board of directors meeting? It was because I got to meet a bunch of we hired.
Nice.
I mean, if you think about it, this last year, Libsyn bought Auxbus. They bought Glow.fm. What else did we buy? There was something else I thought. which is escaping my brain.
Bought a lot. Seems like
Yeah.
every other week.
And Advertise Cast. So it's the joy of getting all those to integrate. And so there was a lot of the whole team members that I don't really get to see a whole lot. So it was a lot of it was just, meet and greet and go out to dinner and that whole 9 yards, which is fun because it's free food. So what more do you want?
Nothing says single like free food, right? Gary Stockton says in the chat room, he says about a big screen, big green screen that pulls down. It's just like a projector screen, but it's green. It fitted above the window, commercial lights mounted to the ceiling. So another good way probably to if you're thinking about a green screen implementation, if you can get one, just remember the farther back it is, the wider it needs to be. So, you've got to kind of get that sweet spot too.
Yeah.
When I started here in this studio area at home, work didn't like my setup. They didn't like the casualness of it.
Right.
And they didn't like the clutter. I love clutter. And it used to be a lot more cluttery. The pandemic kind of ruined that. I used to have a lot of boxes and stuff in here and different things.
Skis.
I did have skis. Yeah. I hid those, right? Although they're in the shed right now. I got the running medals and stuff like that. So, but I get comments from people like I'll talk to folks and like, oh, I like your background. I like it that way. So it's a little bit of in the eye of the beholder, don't you think? I mean, I think a background, some people like Dave, yours might be a little too dark for some. Some may really like the darkness of it. So it's tough. I don't think whether you go virtual or real, I don't think you're ever going to convince everybody that's the way it should be.
Well, then you find out later that, you had a Mountain Dew can in the background or whatever. And like right now, my bookcase looks horrible because I grabbed a bunch of books out of it. So all my books are like leaning because it's not half as full as it used to be.
Yeah.
Speaking of really good audio, Dave, you might want to keep your mouth somewhere near the microphone. Just a thought. But yeah, and it's one of those things that I think video backgrounds are probably a little bit like your website, where every now and then you're just going to tweak them because, you haven't tweaked them in a while. So, what are you going to do? We do have a question here in the chat room from Andrew. Do you have to be on Apple Podcast to have a successful podcast? Boy, that's a really interesting question. I don't like how unverified people can randomly leave trashy reviews. In many cases, they never listen to the show.
That's the danger of any platform.
Yeah, it doesn't. You could be on Google. You could be on. Can you leave comments on Google? I mean,
is Google even doing podcasting at this? It's such a mess over there.
Here's a better question: does anybody care about reviews? Did you hear? There's. I was listening to Bandrew Scott, and a Chinese company got banned from Apple because they were basically buying 5-star reviews. And they got, like, they would say, like, you'd buy a product and they would send you an email like, hey, thanks so much for buying this product. Would you, we'll send you this free product if you just leave a 5-star review for the product that you bought. And it was like, and they got busted, and I forget how, there were a lot of products that got that. And I don't know. I don't
think so. Back to his original question. Do you have to be on Apple Podcasts? No. I don't think you have to be. Now, you're leaving a large segment, right? Let's just be really clear.
Yeah, about 60%.
A large segment. But last time I checked, there's apps for iOS that aren't beholden to Apple. So you could have folks do that. Could you do it? Yes. Do you have to work harder? Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Right? You just made it harder to consume your information. So that's where you're like, get listed on podcastindex.org, drive people to newpodcastapps.com, but you
can do it.
Because when you're on Apple Podcasts, it's at least 10 different apps pull from the back end. So when you're on Apple Podcasts, you're automatically added to Overcast, which is in the top 5. So now you shot number 1 down, and you shot number, so let's say 4 down because you're not an Apple Podcast. So you're just going to make it harder. I mean, Alex Jones still has a podcast. You just have to manually subscribe to it. So we go back to 2005. You have to tell people, hey, right click on that little orange button, copy the link, put it into, I mean, I deal that with, it's interesting. When Libsyn bought Glow, there's a guy, I think his first name is Matthew Savage. He's kind of a right-wing guy. And his audience is, and I mean this in a loving manner, old. I mean, they're straight up old. So they don't have smartphones. Old. That's how, and so I'm teaching them how to subscribe on Google Podcast website and in Apple iTunes if you're on a PC. And it's like, wow, this is very 2005 because you have to copy and paste this special link. Glow is made up. It's supposed to be super easy. If you have some sort of podcast app, you just log in your Glow account, click a button. It's like, oh, you're on an iPhone. Here, listen to an Apple podcast. Well, they're not on an iPhone. So, yeah. So if your goal is, I'm with Randy here. Why would you not want to be an Apple podcast? And if the thing is, if you don't want crappy reviews, then don't start a podcast because it's just.
Listen, if you don't want to deal with the ecosystem, you don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to do it. It doesn't mean you don't. You don't have a podcast. You can.
Well, first of all, the other thing we should probably throw out there: define successful.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. That could be.
There's plenty of platforms you can drive people to, and still do this without having to be on Apple, and Spotify being one of those. Spotify is a solid third, and in some cases, it's a solid second. And so, you could do it that way if you wanted to, for sure.
Yeah, Scott from what was that like.com? If you haven't checked out that podcast, he says it's monumentally difficult to be a successful podcast on Apple Podcasts. That's a great point. If you eliminate that factor, it's exponentially more difficult. It's kind of like, hey, can I run a successful marathon with one leg? You can. It's going to be a little harder. Actually, it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a fair comparison. I think it's more like it's two legs, but you're adding some weight. Like, because that's really, I mean, a one-legged marathon would be really, really difficult. But I think it's more like adding weight. Could you do it? Yeah. Is it going to slow you down a little bit? Probably, and be a little bit harder, most likely. But I don't necessarily agree with Scott's premise there. I actually think
well, let's look at it this way.
I think Apple Podcasts is the discovery mecca of podcasting. You're greatly mistaken, right?
Right. I mean, it's not a great discovery platform, but it does make it easy to follow people and subscribe. So I'm going to use your analogy.
Yeah.
Right now. Right now, I unfortunately weigh 235 pounds. It's the heaviest I've ever weighed. So Apple represents 60% of the market. So if I increase my weight by 60%, I would weigh 376 pounds. So now how easy is it to walk around with 376 pounds versus 235? That's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, and there's no right or wrong answer here. What's harder, walking around with another 141 pounds or dealing with crappy trolls? Because the trolls are always going to be there. There's nothing. And whatever you do, don't start a YouTube channel because YouTube is even worse. YouTube is just troll city and people will,
but
they just.
It's sort of. So in Home Gadget Geeks, I mean, I have a fairly, I've got 1,400 followers over there, or subscribers, whatever, on YouTube. I don't get, and Gallup's even bigger, and I don't get, I get a little bit of it. Now, part of it is I moderate it pretty heavily, but I don't get and I've seen it, trust me, I've seen it, but I don't get it as much. So I think it kind of depends what you invite and what you ask for and what channels you land in.
Yeah.
And certainly, listen, if you're just doing this because you want to avoid bad reviews, unless you got somebody that's got something against you, just brush off the reviews, right?
Yeah.
Just be like, and sometimes negative reviews. Didn't we have a story of a person who had a negative 1-star review?
Oh yeah,
sure. They kind of embraced it, right?
It was something like, it was an LGBTQ and sometimes Y podcast, and I think somebody put. See, I don't want to say the slur, but it's a slur for lesbians that begins with a D and rhymes with mics. And so it said stupid blank, I think was the review, if I remember right. Yeah. And they took it and put it on t-shirts. I think that was it. It was some sort of slur. And they were like, you know what? Yes, we are, doggone it. And they made a t-shirt and they kind of owned it, right? They're kind of like, you took all the sting right out of it. Yeah.
Last year. Oh, go ahead. Read this.
Well, I know Uncle Marv says, I know some niche podcasts that are successful without Apple, but they are really geek niches. Again, that goes back to that. I know Sergeant Fred says I have had some success without a couple of my podcast shows not in Apple Podcasts, and I got the right audience, and I didn't get crappy reviews. So the great thing about it is you can turn it's a switch, right? I could list my show in Apple Podcasts, and if I start getting crappy reviews, I can go in and hide it. And then later, if I want to, I can go back and unhide it. So you can, it doesn't have to be like delete forever. If you want to take it out, you could. So
yeah.
There
you go.
Scott says, like saying you don't need a car, just walk or bike everywhere. Problem solved, but not yet.
Yeah, Scott, that's actually a really good analogy. That's a good one. A car versus walking or biking everywhere. You can do it, or taking the bus. Public transportation versus your own transportation. You can. You're gonna have to think about it a little bit more.
Yeah. So Andrew says, thanks, Jim. Yeah, it's a tough question. It really is.
It's a good question. I think
it's a really good question. So yeah.
You know what was also really good, Dave?
What's that?
That you've got some really awesome
supporters.
That,
he said scrambling behind the scenes to turn on his PowerPoint.
It's okay. I thought I'd give you, if I stretched it out a little bit, more. I'd give you. So maybe while you're doing that, you can give me a little
more coffee for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do have our awesome supporters. You can become an awesome supporter by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And we want to thank James over at the podcast, the Podcast Dog Network. That is not it. I'm sorry. Where's my buzzer? There we go. It is the Dog Podcast Network.com. And it's for dog lovers. So if you need something to listen to while you're walking your dog around the block or wherever you're going, or I don't know about you, but it is fall here in Ohio. I woke up this morning. We'll take a tangent in the middle of talking about James. Yeah. I woke up this morning scared to death because I thought the house was on fire. And Jim, I bet you can guess what happened.
A furnace came on.
The furnace came on, and I was like, I'm like, what is? I'm like, something is definitely burning. And I get up, and I was like, oh no, I hear the furnace, and
the smell of burning dust.
That's it. So you will not get burning dust over at the Dog Podcast Network. You'll get awesome podcasts. They got short podcasts, long podcasts. Everything is there. Dogpodcastnetwork.com. And of course, our awesome $20 a month supporters, people like Michael Delaney. He's in the chat room right now over at Baby Mountain Radio Productions, where podcasting and hard work are made fun. Check him out at babymountainradio.com. The Indie Drop-In Network. If you've got a true crime show or a comedy show or a scary show, go over to indiedropin.com. You can actually give him a few episodes, and he's got an audience over there that likes that stuff. So it's a great kind of built-in cross-promotion tool. Shane, who was over in England and in Germany, host of the Tourpreneur podcast. If you operate a tour business or plan on starting one, this podcast is for you. So he should be back, I think, next week. He's coming back. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. If you've got a horsey, you want to go check out Glenn over at horseradionetwork.com. Tons.
Even if you don't, and you just like horses.
Yeah. That's it. Or tune in for Friday. On Friday, turn into Horses in the Morning and listen to bad ads.
Yeah.
Where they read these really bad ads from like Craigslist and stuff like that. Like, come, you can buy Sparky the horse. He's only broken 4 ribs of 5 different people. So see if you can avoid his kick kind of stuff. Ed Sullivan, which we got to here last week over at Sonic Cupcake.
Producer extraordinaire.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really helpful. I felt like a rock star sitting on a stage, having a producer. That's pretty great. If you ever get a chance as a podcaster to get in that kind of situation where someone's there making sure you sound great, it's pretty awesome. So Ed, thanks for doing that last week.
Felix over at the Latin Podcast Awards, that's dedicated to enhancing the visibility of Latinx podcasts around the world since 2017. Find him at Latin Podcast Awards. Did you see? It's Tangent Day on. It's going to take us 20 minutes to get through the.
It's good. It's all right.
Did you see the thing from Danny Pena? Speaking of Latin, it's Latin Heritage Month, and Danny Pena from Gamertag Radio, who I think now lives in the West Coast, came back to New York City because in Times Square, because of his affiliation with Twitch, he was on a billboard in Times Square. I'm like, how weird does that have to feel It was like, that is a because of my podcast story.
Yeah.
Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. So if you're a pilot, check him out, aviationnewstalk.com. I don't know what's up with my mouse today. KJST Media. That is an LGBTQ plus founded company focused on helping all levels of podcasters to grow their podcast, regardless of what you're looking for. We are here to help you. And you can find them again at kjstmedia.com. Greg over at financial wellness. You know, my brain is just my mouth, my brain, they're not working.
You got to remember a lot of things today.
Yeah. Debtshepherd.com is the website for Greg, where he teaches financial wellness. And Kim over at Toastmasters101.net. If you're looking to develop your voice, reduce your editing time, and improve your content, you want Toastmasters. Check her out at Toastmasters101.net. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, again, go to AskThePodcastCoach.com/awesome, or go over to AskThePodcastCoach.com/store. And there are more options there to support the show. And speaking of that, if you have ordered a autographed copy of Profit from Your Podcast, those will be going out Monday, because I couldn't, well, it's not that I couldn't find one, but I kept thinking I was going to have time to find a post office in Pittsburgh. And it was like, yeah, we're doing another working lunch. And you're like, oh, okay. So that was
never got out.
It never got out.
Hey, one more thing before we go. Chris sent me, here we go. Chris sent me a couple weeks ago some coffee from Island Coffee out of Richardson, Texas. And you can order from them. This is a green room blend. Really delicious. So much so that my wife continues to shark coffee that I make in the mornings, even before the show. She knows I need a full pot, and she steals some. She stole some this morning. So Chris, thanks for sending that over. If you're interested in really good, sustainable, delicious coffee, check out Island. It's EILAND.com. Check them out. Chris, thanks for sending. And if you want to send me coffee to try on the show, you can do that as well. You can send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, and we can get that arranged.
There we go. Rich has another great question from the chat room. What do you think is the best podcast discovery platform? And my answer is it's a network, and that network is called Your Friends. In fact, that's actually the question of the month right now. If you want to squeak in, I haven't started working on it yet. schoolofpodcasting.com/question. And it is, what is the last thing you referred someone to and why?
Yeah.
And so, like, one of my answers is, my brother's like, what should I stream on Netflix? And I said, have you seen Breaking Bad yet? And he went, no. And I went, what? You haven't seen Breaking Bad? And I was like, oh, that's kind of what I'm talking. And then, why did I recommend Breaking Bad? Because it's a really good show. Well, why is it a really good show? So we're kind of looking at, what did you refer? Now, they're really, this is the hidden aspect of this is I also get to understand what my audience is listening to for partnership problems. So I can see who you're listening to and go, hey, my audience mentioned you. So that's also what's going on. But I also want to see what inspires people to share stuff. So that would be mine, because it's really like Apple Podcasts has a Spotify horrendous in terms of just finding the show, let alone recommending it to it. Now, Apple iTunes has a cool thing where it's like, if you like this, you might like this, but that's only on PCs on a desktop. I'm not sure if Apple Podcast does that. I know there's Good Pods is an app. The problem is, to use Good Pods, you have to, and I know this sounds stupid, use Good Pods, and I am married for life to Overcast until something really, really good comes along. It's but usually Jacobs Media in 2019 did a study, and 75% of new podcasts were discovered via word of mouth.
Yeah, that's their best platform for sure.
Yeah,
hands down. Like I don't think there's even a close second to that.
Yeah. Now Scott from What Was That Like has found some really good partners to where they will swap promos or even episodes. Like, because Scott does that show, What Was That Like? Where you might imagine he asked people, hey, what was that like when, the bear ate your face off, which is an actual episode. And it's, so he found other people that do similar shows, that sometimes it's kind of true crimey stuff, that it's in that same, like, kind of spooky, but really good stories. And so he's partnered with them and a couple other things like that. So that's another one. If you can find another podcast, even to just, we used to trade promos back in the day. 2005, 2006, that was, everybody had you'd had a link to your promo on your front page.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody be like, hey, I played your promo. And it's like, oh, you're a skiing show. Sure, I'll play that in my podcast show. We didn't care. There weren't that many. So, somebody asked a question about the comments in Apple Podcasts. Can you hide them? No, that's the fun thing. Yeah. And there, boy, this is a clean show, so I won't say, but there are idiots. And then there are blatant idiots, is what my brother used to say. And there are just some people that are just mean and nasty. Or if we want to put on our psychiatrist hat, hurt people. So, there are just some people, recreational outrage, man. That's
Thanks,
their thing.
Dr. Phil. I appreciate that.
Hurt people. Well, that's why the pickle in the cow can't go into the pig in the mud. And you're like, what? What did he just say?
What are you saying, Dr. Phil? Are you even a doctor?
If you're on a first date, don't give her a wet willy. So, a wet willy, by the way, isn't as dirty as it sounds. You lick your finger and stick it in somebody's ear. Boy, that does sound dirty, doesn't it?
I'll let that one go.
Yeah, there we go. Meanwhile, okay. Next topic. Speaking of Danny Pena, so hold your thought there.
Yeah.
Danny Pena and Glenn the Geek in the chat room here. Mark says, as far as, and I think he's right. They weren't really. I don't know if Glenn was in Apple Podcasts. I know he didn't care about it. Like he didn't know there was a new and noteworthy. So, anyway, you were going to say something.
See,
I shouldn't have done that.
No,
Sorry,
that's okay. It's okay. I'd moved into the chat room to see if I could make some comments in there. I think Gary, there you go. Any recommendations on the best method to clean up phone interview audio? Mouth noises, breathing, unlike guest sound. I like the guests sound quiet except for their answers. Well, I mean, certainly I think in Audacity, in both Hindenburg and all those DAWs, right? You have the ability to identify a piece of audio that you want removed. Yeah. Then you can put that in there and filter the rest out of it. The problem is it takes it out of all the audio. And this is why you get this underwater sound then for when they are talking. Because if you remove certain frequencies from their voice, then, if their voice has the same frequency as the noise, you're going to remove a lot of depth out of their voice. So you have to be really, really careful. I think my recommendation, Dave, is run it through Auphonic first and see what Auphonic does to it, because those guys are freaking geniuses, right, when it comes to this kind of stuff. Run it through there and see what it does. You might just have to go back and do some old school editing where you're literally just cutting out the parts where they're talking and silencing. You can, by the way, you can do this in those apps as well. You can silence it's a lot of work, Dave. Like it's a lot of work to do that, but you can.
The plugin I use on occasion is, I forget who, I think it's Waze, is called NS1. Let me see if I can pull this up. Waze NS1. And what's cool about it is you just turn it up and it's a noise gate and it tends to remove stuff. So that's a way to quiet people when they're not talking. The other thing I do with a phone call is I will go into my equalizer and pull down the mids, because with a phone, that's what's being accented. Hello, we're on the phone. So I actually go in and turn those up. The problem is there's not you can say, oh, I want to make it more clear, and you try to boost your treble, but there's nothing there to boost. It's just been cut out. So all you're doing is going, you're just like, oh, if I turn this up. So the problem, and this is the way I always tell people, a phone call is going to sound like a phone call. And that's why, for me at least, unless it's somebody's putting a gun to my head and it's a big shot smarty pants person, that the only way I can talk to them is on the phone. Okay. And I can deal with that, but it's tough. It really is. If you've got the budget and some time to go through the learning curve, there's RX8, I think now, that has a really cool noise reduction. I have it because I do audio editing as well. Not as much as I used to, but that's pretty handy. They have a great deverb option, but as Jim was saying, it's like icing. A little icing is great. A ton of icing and you ruin the cake. And so you have reduced by 5 and it reduces some of the noise, but not all of the noise. Reduced by 6 and everybody's underwater. And you're like, so there is a time with the phone, you're kind of polishing a turd. You're like, well, I can get it to look a little better, but it's gonna. And that's where I think it's okay if you're on a mic and your guest is on a phone. But in the days of Blog Talk Radio, when you were on a phone and they were on a phone, for me, that was, I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. There are 4 other million podcasts to listen to.
The only difference I would say on like on that sound is sometimes that phone sound is easier to hear in your car. Now we're getting farther and farther away from that because cars are, you know, they're like mini studios now. They're so well insulated. They're so well sound designed. I mean, they've really done a lot in vehicles to make the sound great. And a lot of sound systems didn't used to be this way, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago in cars, where I think every car now comes with a fairly premium sound system, as opposed to you had to buy that. You used to have to, that was an add-on, right? You'd get crappy audio. Well, that phone sound cuts through the road noise better than bassier because it's higher on the frequency spectrum. And the road noise is lower on the frequency spectrum. It's lower, it's lower tones. So you could hear it better in those higher tones. You could hear better in the car. In some cases, in a bad car, you can hear AM better than you hear FM because AM's that higher frequency, right? So now do you want to make your podcast sound like that? Just no,
radio?
No, you don't. But don't be as afraid of it. I think to your point, if you're fine and your guest is sounding that way, don't be as afraid of it, because I think mentally we're okay. Listeners are okay with the guest sounding poor as long as it's reasonable.
Yeah, as long as it's
listenable. Yeah, you can't be a host sounding like crap. And you just kind of alluded to this. Yeah, you can't be a host sounding like crap. You need to sound good for your listeners.
Yeah.
Guests can get away with it.
Well, and the other thing is, it has to be listenable. When your how you sound distracts from what you're saying, that's a problem. It gets kind of sticky, and people are like, why does it sound like they're, is there a dolphin going to swim by? It sounds like they're underwater, and it's just like, and then it's one of those things too, that once you hear that, you kind of can't unhear it.
Right.
It's like, it's kind of sticky.
In Gary's case, he maybe even would want to apply just a software gate. Like, look at the silence. And I think you can do this in all of them too, in Audacity for sure. Say anything below this frequency, if you identify that they're, just gate it. And then it'll let it through when the frequency or when the volumes are higher, and it'll gate it when it's lower. I'm pretty sure you can do that via software, right? After the fact, in post, you can run a gate on audio. Yeah. So that'd be another way to do it quickly, not have to go in and identify each one of those gaps and silence them. Again, when you're using software, if the frequency goes above the gate, it's going to show up. So you still want to check it. But it would save you a bunch of time from having to go through and silence all those gaps, in Gary's case, where he was getting noise.
Look at me adding things on the fly.
Boom.
I just talked about Danny Pena. This is an audio from Danny Pena in Times Square, New York City. So I'm trying to isolate Danny's vocal, and you'll hear where the background noise is a little weird.
20 years ago, I was here for the launch of Xbox. And because of that, I created my podcast, Gamer Tech Radio. I was very inspired with everything that happened at that time.
Yeah.
20 years later, I'm on the billboard because of the podcast.
So I finally went, you know what? That's not usable. Like, I can
because of the wash. You can hear the wash. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, I was like, so I might have him come on the show, or maybe I'll just do what I just did and talk about it.
If the clip is that short, Dave, it's not that bad. I mean,
right.
You could probably, and that's post. What did pre sound like?
Horrendous. Traffic going by behind. Yeah.
People
and that was
talking.
the first thing I did, was I ripped out all the bass. I was like, let's try to focus on just the
get that high
spectrum of the So Fred says Steve Stewart's webinar on using Audacity shows how to do cleanup effects for I've played with Audacity's noise removal tool. There are better ones out there, but it is free. So it is, if it's not too noisy, you can do some pretty cool things with that. There are a lot of tools in Audacity that you can make things do it. Covert Nerd says, Jim hit it. If you have 2 tracks, slicing out the only true way is to clean it up. Yeah. So if you have 2 tracks, meaning one's you and one's your guest. So yeah, that's where the having 2 tracks, whether it's on a Rodecaster or Squadcast or whatever, that's where it really comes in handy for that. So it can and then if speaking of RX, Mark says it's a free upgrade to RX9 when you purchase R8 RX8 currently, which is not cheap. That is a not cheap software, but it gets a little, depending. Again, this is one of those where, like, do I need RX9 to be a podcaster? No, but if you're doing the audio editing, you can save a lot of time by having the right tools that you don't have to kind of pull out the scalpel to do some cleaning and things like that. Yeah, let's see what else. The chat room's going crazy this morning.
Yeah, they're doing it. They're doing a really nice job. Like, it's just a good active. I mean, this is a good, healthy, active chat room this morning. Thanks, guys.
He's back. Daniel J. Lewis, you missed my testimonial earlier. Fred was asking about your emails, and I said, Daniel J. Lewis, he doesn't make crap. So if you ever need that for like a testimonial page, just, he doesn't make crap, Dave Jackson School of Podcasting. So glad to have you here. I did have a question. I don't think I asked this last week. And I'm doing some, as I'm redoing things for the School of Podcasting, what do you use, or do you use, maybe is even a better question, to capture ideas / organize your podcast content? Do you use anything, Jim?
I'm basically just a Google Sheet or Google Docs, a sheet. I've got a spreadsheet that's got every show since 100 listed out, who's the guest, what we're talking about, appropriate links, some of those kinds of things. But I don't spend a lot of time organizing Home Gadget Geeks that way. For Gallup, a completely different story. So, we have one of those to get it set, but then we have systems internally that we use. We don't get super fancy with it, to be honest. But when you have 3 or 4 people touching the podcast during its production cycle, you do need some coordination in that. One of the things I've found that works the best is just old school talking face to face. I have a production meeting every week. We get together on video, go through the list of things that we're working on, where are we at in progress, those kinds of things. Serves 2 purposes. One, we actually get things done that way. And then 2, we actually get to see each other that way. And so we would have done this virtually had we been even in person. COVID kind of made that a thing where, okay, well, we'll do it virtually now. I can't underestimate the power of meeting in person. Like, you went to Pittsburgh this week.
Yeah.
Very different week for you in person than it would have been, right? And so in this case, I think I like having a production meeting once a week just to update everybody. Hey, we're doing this, we're doing that. Here's what's coming ahead, kind of deal. That's my best production tool, is just face-to-face conversation.
Because I see Gabrielle says, I use Airtable. Diane's a Trello girl. Rich will come back to your question about Riverside in a second. I just heard about this one, ClickUp. It's like Asana. And because what I was thinking about is right now in the School of Podcasting, I have little baby courses on Evernote, Trello, and OneNote. And I think what I'm going to do is do a course with a deeper dive into Evernote, because what I'm also finding is if you have a tool, you probably had that tool before you joined the School of Podcasting. Like, people have already been organizing their stuff and they're not going to switch. So it's like, okay, if you don't have one, here's the one I use. And go that route. So I was just asking because it's one of those where I'm like, well, maybe I should make if everybody said, oh, I use Notion, and Notion is a little bit like Airtable. It's a little more powerful, but there's a little more of a learning curve. So, and then
we tried organizing one time our workflow in SharePoint. So that was we had a SharePoint site at Gallup. We use them internally. And so I had a SharePoint site, and that allows you to bring in spreadsheets. And I had different, all the files associated with one place. I kind of found it was almost too much. Like, you can organize something too much, and then you spend more time talking about the organization than you actually spend talking about the work or doing the work. You're organizing for 4 hours to do 30 minutes worth of work. That worked for George Washington when he was sharpening his axe. That doesn't necessarily work in production processes, right? So, you don't want to be, I think sometimes we just go a little over the top on this organization stuff. At the end of the day, like, let's get enough to keep people busy, and then let's move forward. It's like sometimes we spend too much time trying to hedge, like we're trying to solve problems before they exist.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I can't do that because it's not scalable in the future. And you're like, well, is it scalable right now? Because you may be able to do it for a long time before it's not scalable anymore. Then, be thinking about a solution, but then solve the problem when it actually gets here. Don't cut yourself out of it before it happens.
Yeah, Craig, this is another good one. I record a quick audio file on my iPhone and filter the bad ideas out once a week. I
Good
like
idea.
that one.
It's a good idea.
I've never heard of this one. Gary says, I use Wrike, Wrike. It's pretty good. You can set up blueprints for episodes. You can also now in Captivate and Libsyn do these things called snippets. So if it's anything you type, like I made a snippet that has links like, hey, if you'd like to subscribe/follow the show, here's a link in Apple, Google, Spotify, and Amazon. And I can just add that into each episode now by clicking on snippets in Libsyn 5, by the way, not Libsyn 4, and just click that button and it adds it to my description. So that's a way to kind of do like little baby templates, or at least little sections. So I have one for Mark for, podcast branding. I have one for the Dog Podcast Network, and I have one for Dave over at why can I never remember the name of his podcast about If It's True, the based on a true story podcast. I have those all set up.
Dan, when I say Dave?
Yeah,
you said Dave.
Yeah, Dan.
That's all right. It's a D. Lots of Daves.
It's a D. Yeah. So that's another way you can do that. I was just curious, like I said. Let's go back to Rich had a question about Riverside.fm. And yeah, the biggest issue we had was the live broadcasting. Now, Riverside is one of those programs that if you were an early adopter, you had a better chance, which isn't that the case with every company. You had a little better chance of having a bad experience. I had a bad experience with Riverside when it first launched. Not really fair to judge them on that. And then it's also kind of not fair to judge them on their live streaming thing, even though they have it on their front page like, hey, we do this live streaming thing. That's really not their, it's like if they were in college, that's their minor, not their major. And so I know some people that I totally trust. I mean, James Cridlin uses it on Podland. Matthew Passy has had great experiences with Riverside.fm. I just have not. Now, for the record, I don't care if it's Riverside or Squadcast or Zencaster or Zoom or Clean Feed, or I think I got them all. Skype have a hardware going in the background, hence the PodTrack P4. I don't care who I'm using. I got one of these going in the background, or in my case, I've always got a hardware going, because no matter what it is, the more important the guest, the better the chance that your audio is going to be eaten. And just be ready to do the call of shame. So it's a lot of fun, because I think they all eventually, it's a case of,
yeah, it happens.
Yeah, it happens. That's basically it. Well put. And I can't.
It just does. You're gonna. I haven't had one. I shouldn't say this. I'm just not gonna say it because it'll. I was gonna say I haven't had one in a long time. But
there you go.
Myself.
You ruined it. Now you're gonna be great. Thanks, Jim. I'll get done. Sorry.
Did you hit record on this one?
I actually did. Okay. It's shocking. But
it would be just our luck, right?
Yeah. And if this is like your first interview, make sure your first interview is with somebody that it doesn't count. So this is why I always say interview your kids, your spouse, your cousin, your uncle, your friend down the street, whoever it is. You don't want to be doing the first one for a real interview. I know when I played with Riverside, the live version, I did a webinar with myself where I invited myself in, and I saw they were there. So I was playing with it, but I never saw it. I never took the time to really look from the audience point of view. I was just making sure I understood the back end, assuming that the audience view would be fine, not knowing that it was going to pixelate the crap out of us and make us look horrible. So
it was a pretty awful experience. I mean, not their fault. Or we could have done some things if we were using that on a more regular basis. We probably would, Dave. We'd do it a little bit differently, right?
Yeah.
But just inherently, the video is not very good, and they do that on purpose, right? So, you're not getting this kind of quality. By the way, has my video and audio quality been okay during the show, or has there been moments where it's locking up? Or
Yes, you're occasionally locking up.
yeah, I'm gonna have to give my internet service provider a call, because it seems like the bandwidth drops down to nothing and then drops down to nothing and comes back. So I saw this on Thursday night. You've got a little up in the corner on StreamYard here. You have a little thing. Did it do that while I was?
Yes, as you were saying that, you said it's got cut.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's doing that. Yeah. So
I'm gonna have to work with them. I have the full service plan, so I'm gonna call him and just say, you need to send somebody out. This isn't working right for me. So, well, and I do need to eliminate. There's a couple things I need to eliminate. I need to eliminate the Mac. I need to eliminate some other things on here to make sure it's just not hardware.
Yeah. Daniel says it might be time to upgrade your hardware.
It's all been upgraded, and it was working fine till 2 weeks ago. So yeah, and maybe so. It could be. I mean, I do have a new-ish router that could be doing it. So I got some testing to do, but we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, you never know. But as we start to walk out the door here, Rich is mentioning here that some of the workflow obsessions remind me of the pre-meeting for the pre-meeting for the meeting. Yes, I once worked for a company where I had to document, like, if I breathed, and it was like, what did you do today? I documented the fact that I'm documenting my documentation, so you can see that I really didn't do anything besides document the fact that I'm documenting my documentation. It was crazy. That's when I learned really quick that I do not work well under micromanagement. So, but Jim, what's coming up on the averageguy.tv?
I mentioned it, but Ross Brand joined us, and we talked about his book, 100 live streaming predictions that he put together from creating a book from self-publishing. We talked about it from that standpoint, and so Ross came on and do that. In the post show, I've got some big warnings about Windows 11. So if you're not a Patreon, if you're not getting the post show stuff, you might want to listen. But you can catch Ross's episode out at the averageguy.tv.
Nice. On the School of Podcasting, we'll be playing your answers. If you haven't done that, do it now. Schoolofpodcasting.com/question. So I'll be playing those, as well as somewhere in the future, I'm going to talk about how to come back when you took a break. I think that's a topic that I heard a really bad example, and I was like, "Ooh, we need to talk about that." So that'll be coming up on the School of Podcasting. So thanks again to Mark over at podcastbranding.co. Thanks to James at the Dog Podcast Network, and thanks to Dan, Dick, Steve, it's Dan over on based on a true story podcast.com. Thanks to all of our awesome supporters, and stick around for some post show. And we're going to talk about Windows 11, which means Jim is going to nerd out.